Welcome back, everyone, to the Frosty Canuck podcast. I'm your host, Jason, along with Steve.
My cat is fucking evil.
Yeah, we know your cat's evil. It's in heat, it's Satan cat, yeah, all that fun stuff.
She had surgery to remove the heat. Well, she removed her ovaries. And it seems like there might be some complications following the surgery. So that's fun. I like how this is going exactly as well as it could have, which is to say that everything is going wrong because this cat is cursed.
I think you're cursed at this point.
I'm not cursed.
Sorry, man,
I had a perfect life before I picked up this godforsaken animal and brought it into my apartment.
Yeah, it's not a black cat, too, so it's not like it crossed your path, so...
No, Satan has disguised itself among us. In the least obvious form.
As a white angel.
Yep. Anyway, let's just get right into it. We have some backlogged questions from a couple of weeks ago. From a number of people.
Well, the guest episode was kind of spontaneous.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nintendo Direct.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got to have Ian on. It was fun. I thought it was fun.
No, it was fun. I just mean, like, we were, like, kind of waiting for that, and then we're like, oh, we're going to have a whole episode about China. Hint, hint, later we're discussing about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not going to be entirely about China. It's been like a month since the big news happened, so I don't know if I have as much interest in it as I did before, but I still want to bring it up because I said we were going to bring it up, so. But we're going to start with viewer questions first because I want to get these fucking things out of the way. That said, I appreciate all the questions that we get from people, but good lord, I hate when we have them backlogged for several weeks because it's like, god damn it. It just feels like we gotta do them.
Feel guilty.
So I guess we'll start with Charlie's, which is chronologically the oldest of the three.
Yep, that's fair.
So Charlie asks us, what makes a good roguelike? What separates Hades or Slay the Spire from the other garbage on insert your favorite store here? I don't know if I was supposed to say Steam for that. Pretty straightforward question, I think. I think he asked it very deliberately because I play it, well, not a fuck ton of roguelikes, but I spend quite a bit of time with some of them, and I have opinions.
I thought you were the king of roguelites.
I guess, yeah, that was the meme, wasn't it?
I need to double check what I've even played roguelikes. Other than, like, Hitman 2, I'm kind of blanking on some of the ones I've played.
Yeah, and Hitman 2 is only, like, a roguelike in the sense of, it's built around, like, repetition. Right?
Yeah.
But it's not a roguelike in like in the traditional sense. But for me, it had a lot of the same hooks.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess like the biggest thing is that the majority of the better, or what is generally agreed upon to be the better roguelikes, tend to have a really, really, really strong core gameplay loop.
Mm-hmm.
You got to think with the general structure of a roguelike. You're going to be playing a game. You play through it, and then you die or you win, and then you play through it again. It's going to be really repetitive. There's probably going to be a very large time window within your first several hours where you are just going to get your ass whooped.
How long would you say, like, Hades is? How long would you say, like, 2 hours is a run or something like that?
Most of my runs were between 30 and 40 minutes.
Okay. But, like, you spent so much time with that because the core gameplay loop is just, like, continually dying, so you play like 20 minutes or something like that, and then you die, and then you play another like 20 minutes, then die.
Yeah.
So that's what builds up the time. It's really funny because it's like sometimes there's not an insane amount of content, but like because you're going over and over and over again, it's like, I guess like one thing for me would be like Dark Souls. Like that's a game where you die and then you come back. It's kind of roguelike.
Yeah, you've got the same sorts of, like, it's the same sort of hook, right? Where the idea is that you're playing the game multiple times and you're slowly building up your understanding of the systems, understanding of the combat, and then your ability to perform in that context over repeated attempts. It's mastery through repetition, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if the core thing that you're doing is fun. So I think that's like the biggest thing that separates the good from the bad. Does your game have a really compelling core loop? Is it the type of game where somebody can feasibly spend several hours playing over and over and over again, and despite losing, still have fun playing it because the game is just really enjoyable? I think if you don't have that, then fundamentally are already off to a pretty bad start. Yeah, well, it's just like, okay, the game isn't really that fun to play over and over again. Okay, why is it a roguelike then? And I think a big component as well, like what you mentioned before, is that you have a game that is mechanically deep. It doesn't have to have a lot of content necessarily, but it does have to be mechanically deep. So there has to be something for players to really sink their teeth into. Generally speaking, I think the vast majority of the more popular roguelikes tend to have like a very high skill ceiling, which comes from either an incremental difficulty or the game's just being hard as fuck because they know you're going to be playing them for a really long time.
Like Enter the Gungeon.
Oh yeah, Gungeon's hard as... And you know what's weird is that Gungeon does kind of have incremental difficulty because it's hard as fuck to begin with, but then there's like a bunch of secret bosses that get more hard than the standard run stuff.
Oh, God.
So it's like that's the incremental difficulty. You can complete the basic runs, which is what I did. And then what's more challenging is when you go back and you do Bullet Hell, which is an entire extra level that is added in once you finish the past killing for all the main characters.
Oh, God.
What was the final boss is replaced with a harder version of it, and then there's an even harder final boss that has 3 phases, I think. And then there's like another type of run you can do where the rat who constantly runs in and steals your shit if you leave it behind in a room for too long, you can fight him. There's a bunch of secret bosses you can find along the way, like along the path that you would need to take to get to the rat, and you can also intersperse those into your run. Typically, I think that in Gungeon, going through more areas makes the run harder because you have more opportunities to make mistakes, where just going through like a standard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 run is not as brutal.
Gotcha.
Unlike some other games, Gungeon is very much one where your health is so scarce that choosing to go to other floors hoping to find offensive based resources is almost always there's going to be more opportunities for you to lose your health, and the further into Gungeon you get, the less frequent you're going to find health drops. Really, it ends up being a case of like, if you try and farm more out of your run, you're actually going to probably be less successful, which is not exactly how most other roguelikes will work. But yeah, so those are like, I think, the 2 biggest things. You gotta have a very strong core loop that's fun enough for people to want to spend a lot of time with it. And then I think that having a game that is mechanically dense, there's like a lot of things to discover, there's a lot of things to learn, a lot of things to master. I think those are like the 2 kind of biggest things that separate the really good roguelikes from the not so great ones. There are, I would say, individual pieces of different things and different games that you could point to as being like a big reason why game X or Y or Z are successful. Like I think Hades is very successful because of the narrative related stuff that it throws in. That's not something that the other roguelikes really have. So that helps it kind of stand out a lot from the pack. Gungeon's just really compelling to play and like really fun to play. Slay the Spire has like an incremental difficulty thing, which I found really fun to dig into. Same with Monster Train. It's a game where the more you like want the game to push back, the more it'll force you to learn the systems at play in the game. And so you learn a lot of them, and you can learn how to just like completely break the game in half, which is hilarious.
So you like becoming like God in some of them almost?
Yeah, it's just a lot of, and maybe like a side bit, because I don't think that in Hades you end up with builds that are inextricably broken, but in Streets of Rogue or Monster Train or Binding of Isaac, those are all games where you can get builds that are absolutely god tier builds if you know kind of what you're doing and kind of how to play things. Although I think like Isaac's a lot more random. But in Monster Train, certainly, you can completely just break the game in half when you know the majority of what can happen and how certain things will interact with one another. Same with Streets of Rogue. When you get deeper into the weeds of that, you can do some absolutely crazy stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, my character individually might not have the strength to do whatever it is that I need to do, but there's a bunch of systems at play in this game that I know how to leverage such that I can complete my goals with relative ease. And there's very little risk involved for the player character.
Well, like your example last episode where it was the slime that basically just ate all the cannibals. That was
exactly. They did the work for me, right?
Yeah.
I think the best one was when I had that killer robot chasing me, and I quite literally just had it fire off. Like I kept entering its line of sight, so it would fire off missiles at me, and I used that to clean up the entire map. So all I had to do is just keep bobbing and weaving between the missiles, and it was doing all the work for me.
Yeah, because the only thing that's aggroed against you is the robot, not the other people.
Yep, the people get shot by the robot, and they go after the robot, who has a shitload of health and just destroys them. So roguelikes they're a fascinating game type. I think it's very simple. It's just you gotta have a fun game and a deep game. So, or at least some people have to find the game fun. Not everyone does, but some people do. So. Do you have anything else to add, Jason? I know that you don't.
No,
play a
I'm
whole
not
lot,
the king of roguelikes.
Yeah,
I'm
I gotta get you to play some, man.
Eventually. I've got a couple on my...
Oh, which ones?
God damn it. Hades will probably be Black Friday. There you go.
Okay.
Or it'll be next year, so I don't have to mention it on the Games of the Year episode.
Yeah. How big are you on like card games?
Well, the Square Enix one didn't.
Yeah, no, but I mean like real.
me.
I mean like real card games, because that was just a card thing on top of an
I
RPG,
know.
right?
First opinion of a card like game, and I was just like, oh, this is shit. I mean, I've kept my eye on Slay the Spire. I just haven't committed to that.
Yeah, well, like I was gonna say, Slay the Spire and Monster Train. I think that Monster Train is the more. I'm of the opinion now that Monster Train is probably the better game of the two of them, but Slay the Spire is the more simple game of the two of them, which is
better
why it's
starting
more.
point, yeah.
Yeah, it's why it's more popular. But yeah, roguelikes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this is a late question. It was supposed to be for the anniversary episode, but Megan asked it I want to say 12 hours after we finished recording. So I said we'd answer it on the last episode, but the Nintendo Direct took up way the fuck too much time, so we got bumped to this episode. So Megan, friend of the show from Megan Plays Games, she asked, recently watched Jet from In Third Person play It Takes Two, and deadass almost cried during the cutie part. That's the thing that I wrote about earlier on my fucking blog about the bit from It Takes Two that just fucking made me cry, made me feel things, and I wasn't okay with that. Any game that you guys had a really emotional response to, how did it affect your overall opinion of the game? So obviously I'm in the exact same scene, except I was actually doing it. It destroyed me. Oh god, I hated that so much. I wouldn't say that it made me think of the game negatively. I'd actually say it made me think of the game more positively because it was able to actually evoke some kind of emotion instead of me continuing to be a fucking angry monkey. And it is on my shortlist. I do believe I said this on an episode when we did the shortlist for Game of the Year games.
It was in your top 5, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought it was a really good game. I didn't think that... I'm not gonna say it maybe had a better opinion, but well, maybe it did in a way, but...
Which one, man?
It's just, it didn't change the bar that much, because if the game didn't have, a solid gameplay, because the story in that game is kind of...
It's window dressing?
It has its moments, but, there are times where it's not great. But that particular moment was, very affecting. So, that game didn't have, a really solid game part of the game, then it wouldn't have mattered. It would have just been this game that I kind of despised made me feel something. I will try and think of something else. But have you ever gotten the feels from any games that you've played, Jason?
Not an insane amount.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is a hard question for us to answer because we're both emotionless robots most of the time.
Yeah, I'm usually are emotions.
Yeah,
but I'd say maybe the Yakuza games. Whenever there's a significant death scene.
Oh yeah.
It's oh, that really hurts.
You don't necessarily well up from it, but you you feel it, right?
Yeah, you feel it. You're oh, that tear's trying to get out, but no.
Yakuza Like a Dragon, actually, toward the final bits of the story, had some moments that were like that for me.
Yeah.
It's just that the gameplay in that game
you hate
sucks
the gameplay
so much. It's just,
Well, let's talk about Zero then.
Yeah, well, it's just it was such emotional whiplash, though, because you're oh man, the story, I feel this. But then it cuts to that dumbass turn-based combat, and you're oh, for fuck's sake. You're ping-ponging back and forth between the feels, kind of feeling you're gonna well up, and then just being really pissed off and annoyed.
Yeah.
But yeah, Zero had some moments like that as well.
Zero's got lots of moments like that. I mean,
although by the time I got to the final bit of Zero, it was so much machismo men shouting at each other and punching the shit out of each other that I just couldn't take any of the emotional stuff seriously, because it's I just watched a bunch of men rip suits off of their back and beat the shit out of each other, and somehow they were still alive. What the fuck?
Yeah, but the scene where your best friend is I'm gonna kill you, Kiryu, and he's no. It's you can try.
That made me fucking laugh.
I mean, it made me laugh too, but I mean,
So Majima is, even though Zero is kind of a retcon to the entirety of 1 through 6 and how Majima is in any of those games.
Yeah, very much.
I liked him a lot better than Kiryu, not just because of how he's got more of a personality in general, but also because the emotional moments that happen in his story, they actually hit, where in Kiryu's, because he's so dead-faced or deadpan and scowling all the time, I'm what the fuck is even happening? When they were over-the-top macho moments, I'm okay, this works, but when it's trying to be more serious and Kiryu's just sitting with a fucking scowl on his face, I'm what the hell?
Yeah, in that regard, I'm kind of glad that they changed characters, but
Ichiban is a much better protagonist. He has a much wider range of emotions,
he's just
and that
unfortunately
helps.
stuck in an RPG.
We're stuck in a bad RPG. That's the problem.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess this is spoilers for The Lost Judgment, but like Yagami, he's an okay protagonist, but he's not up there.
Oh.
He's trying to still be a bit too serious in like the universe that is Yakuza, and it just, I don't know, for me it doesn't hit the same high points of like I'm laughing my ass off at some of the bizarre shit that's happening.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't know. Whenever I see Lost Judgment, it always looks like it's trying to be more serious than Yakuza is, because Yakuza is like a good balance of corny and serious.
Yeah, that's the thing with the Yakuza games. It's a perfect blend of the two, but with Judgment, it's like leaning way more into the serious part, and then occasionally has its funny moments.
Now it's gotta be serious because it's catering to the Western audience. It's like actually, there's a lot of us here who don't mind the overt Japaneseness of Yakuza proper.
We made Zero like Zero was like the starting point for a lot of people in this series, and we all really liked the wackiness. And yeah, exactly. And that's what got 1 coming over, 2 coming over,
and the rest of them.
Yeah. And that's how we even got to the point where Lost Judgment is the first game that got a worldwide release.
Yeah.
Sega actually sees it as like, okay, it's good in both markets.
Yeah,
put them out together at the same time.
The West can actually enjoy this.
Though I do have some things to mention about that later.
Yeah, but that's later,
but...
I was going to say. Another example, Valkyria Chronicles. I highly recommend, if you like strategy games or like strategy RPGs, check this fucking game out. It is very, very good. It's like an anime version of World War II. It's very overt in the way it presents that. So there's a race of people, and they're the Jews, but they're not called Jews. And there's a group of people who are definitely the Aryan Nazis, but they're not called the Nazis. And we're fighting about resources, not because we want to kill the Jews, but oh no, we actually are totally on board with... I can't remember what they call them in the game. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So spoilers for Valkyria Chronicles. If you want to play the game, stop listening and go to wherever the fucking... I'm going to put a spoiler thing. I have to spoil this to say what moment I found like very affecting in this game. Your main squad, you have the captain, whose name I think was Welkin or something, and his younger sister she's like an adopted younger sister, so she's one of these like faux anime not Jew people. And one of the 5 main characters that's part of your squad, her entire village that she came from was burned down by these Nazis. Some people were protecting a group of Jewish people in this village, right? So she lost her entire fucking family to this like crazy fire when the Nazis were just like, fuck it, let's just burn down the entire village if you're not going to tell us where the Jews are. She got out, but because of that she wanted revenge, so she joins the militia, and that's how she ends up on your squad. But because like the commander of the squad, his like younger sister is like one of these people, she blames them, like, oh, it's your fault that like all of my family is dead.
You weren't there to save them or something.
Yeah, well, so like there's 20 some, I think there's like 20 chapters in the game. For like the first 10 chapters, her name is Rosie. I forget your sister's name, but like Rosie is like totally just up on your sister's shit all the time and just being like a total douche. And then your sister does something for her in like chapter 8, I believe. And then in like chapter 9, she like kind of starts to warm up to her. And in chapter 10, she like finally decides to bury the hatchet. She's like, I'm so sorry for all like the shitty stuff I done. It's not your fault. Your people aren't like responsible for this. The Nazis are responsible, whatever. And as soon as she forgives her, a fucking enemy sniper fucking kills your sister. And that shit destroyed me. Even thinking about it now, I'm welling up a bit. I was like, oh my god, no! It's so bad. You like finally have the redemption arc for this character. No sooner does it happen than who she's like forgives and who's always like very polite to her just gets fucking shot. And Rosie just fucking loses it when that happens. And then I think she unlocks like an extra skill that makes her do just like a shitload of damage to the enemy units. And it's like memories of so and so.
That's an interesting skill.
It hurts so bad. I would say one of like the emotional high points of the entire story.
I'm just imagining that's like the power of friendship, and then there's just the bullet and it says nope.
Yeah, this whole scene is designed very well to get a fucking emotional response from you and to make you even more personally, like if you needed any extra reason to kill these fucking Nazi pieces of shit, that moment after you see like Rosie finally come around and like fucking bury the hatchet, then that shit happens and you're like, oh man, I'm gonna kill these motherfuckers. I'm gonna kill them dead. I'm gonna kill them so bad. And in that case, Valkyria Chronicles was one of my favorite games the year I played it. That's even considering the fact that the PC port doesn't do a whole lot to the game, so it's fundamentally like a game from 2011, I think is when it was originally released. Or maybe 2009. Hold on, I gotta Google this shit.
It's an old game.
It's not old, but it's not young either.
I feel like it was
Oh, 2008. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And then I played it. It was released on Steam, I want to say in 2014, and I played it in 2015. It was one of my games of the year in 2015. This is before I was writing on my blog. But yeah, that game, oh my god. The feels, they're too strong. I recommend that game, but if you just listen to me like spoil that particular plot point,
You're welcome.
I don't know. You make a judgment call on whether or not you want to play it. It's pretty good. I think those are probably two of the best. Well, I guess Valhalla also, but like that one didn't make me cry. That one just made me feel very melancholy. There's just like a lot of things in that game that I found very relatable. You don't have like a cry afterwards, but you just sit kind of in silence, understanding what some of the characters are going through on a very personal, or at least I did, in a very personal level. And that results in a very, like a very melancholy experience instead of more like tears or whatever. I think that's it for things that made me feel kind of sad.
Yeah, I don't get sad. Not anymore.
Okay. I hope that suffices to answer your question, Megan. It was a pretty good question.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, we got one from Maz, because we always got one from Maz. Fill in your bingo cards. Maz pointed out, Bungie once again shows that you should not buy their Destiny expansions as they will remove them from the game 2 to 3 years later. For those who don't know, Destiny 2 has been removing content to make the game smaller.
That you've actively been paying for.
Yeah, so it's like, you know how in World of Warcraft they release different expansions and then like the content, I think they occasionally vault some of the content, but they usually revise it and then re-release it. In this case, Bungie's just removing entire portions of the game and kind of funneling players towards whatever the newest content is, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the question then there is, what are your thoughts on this, and do you recall other instances where a game needs to lose content before it gets a new content update?
I mean, the only things I can think of are like free to play, where it's like, oh, this character's unlocked for this period of time, and then they're gone away, and then.
Yeah, that was the only thing I could think of as well. Like, in my time playing MapleStory, there was certain times where content would be completely removed from the game, but then it would be, like, re-released or revised, but that's a free-to-play game, so you're not actually
the difference is
for
that
anything.
It's, free versus, like, oh, yeah, this is an expansion that I paid $30 for,
$30 or $40
and you're
yeah.
like, nope, you can't have that anymore, like, 2 or 3 years later. I'm
What the
like,
fuck?
that's pretty shit.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I don't know if World of Warcraft does the same thing, but if Blizzard does do the same thing, I'm pretty sure that they do it with the intention of revising and re-releasing the content, similar to how the free-to-play games function, where it's like, okay, this content is so old and so shitty that no one in their right mind is going to play it, so let's revise it so people actually have a reason to come back here. Which I think is actually a good way of doing things. But Bungie is straight up just removing content so they can funnel people into whatever the newest content is.
Yeah,
and make the game have a smaller download because their team doesn't really know what they're doing, maybe.
Yeah, that whole part about getting rid of the content over time, that does not sit well with me. Like,
no, especially when it's paid for. I know, like Destiny 2 base game is free to play, so you could make the argument of like, oh, it's free to play, but no, the expansions are not free to play, so you get that bullshit out of here. You gotta pay for that shit.
Yeah, just you pay for now nothing. Like, I know the same can be said for like when a game finally goes offline, but that's different. That's the game has failed and tough shits.
I think that's fundamentally different because,
yeah,
like you said, the entire game has run its course and it's not financially viable for the developer to keep going.
Destiny 2 is just incredibly
Destiny 2 is successful. Yeah, it's successful by all financial merits,
yeah.
Obviously. But they're removing content despite that, which is weird as hell.
Yeah, let's not make our game rich as hell with content. Let's make it the same over time, which is just slightly different story. And that sucks for anyone who's like starting off like, oh yeah, this part that you never get to experience, this part of the game.
I think most of the base game stuff is there, but yeah, they're fundamentally they're removing just entire swaths of the experience. You're just forced to play whatever the newest shit is.
You just have to read the fucking codex or something like that for the lore. The lore that I missed missed out on her.
The lore for that game is almost entirely located in that codex. Don't people who play Destiny who disagree with me get fucked. That game's lore is distributed in a complete shit show.
Yeah, remember when it was on the website only?
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like it's on a fucking website-based codex. It's like what
that
the hell?
That was the first game. The second game, I think, resolved that.
Did it actually include
I think
it in
they
the second
included
game?
it within the game.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I quite literally cannot think of another game that is paid that does this.
Not paid.
Like, if it is a paid game, usually, in my experience, it usually revises the content or removes it for a brief period of time. The developers revise it and then re-release it. Even in free-to-play games, that can happen. Like I said, MapleStory. There's an entire part of that game that was completely removed and just reworked, and then it was re-added into the game. And they've done that a couple of times, actually. The default classes, before I quit, as part of the big MapleStory Red content update, they just changed how their entire quest line and how the world was designed in the early part of the game. So like an entire portion of the map was just redesigned. That confused the hell out of me. It's like you go back there and you're like, where the fuck is everything?
I've learned this one way of playing the game. Now I'm fucked.
Yeah, well, and then there's like, they redesigned like the skill trees for every one of those classes. So if you played them already, it was like you just got all your skill points refunded to you and just got to respec, which was fine. In a lot of cases, the way they changed the rules made them more unique and more interesting, so I was all for that. Or like the Cygnus Knights, these were a group of character classes that literally no one played, aside from a bunch of sweats who wanted a marginal damage bonus, which I am aware of because I was one of those people. And they completely revised how they worked by just redesigning the classes from the ground up. They just got rid of the entire old storyline and just redid the entire thing. Generally speaking, most people agree that the new stuff was better. It's like, oh, you don't get to experience the old stuff, but it's like, the old stuff was kind of shit, so it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, being free,
but then it's a free-to-play game, so it's like, who the fuck cares if it got removed because we didn't pay for anything?
Yeah, there's
right?
no sentimental value that you're like, oh, I'm losing what
I paid for this expansion and can no longer play it. What the fuck?
Yeah, and
that doesn't happen.
And it's. Don't quote me on this because I don't actually 100% know, but I feel like these expansions you have to own like the previous content in order to get it.
I don't know if that's true anymore. I think that they've adopted a model kind of like what Final Fantasy XIV does, where
that's not as bad.
Yeah, it was like Final Fantasy XIV fundamentally lets you like. I think you buy into the game still, or it might be free to play up to a certain point, but it's like fundamentally you can play the game up to X point and then you just like buy whatever the newest expansion is and it just gives you everything.
Right.
Because it's like, oh, we're not going to charge you for like the old content. That content is there as like a way to get its hooks in you so that you will keep playing, and they charge a subscription fee. So it's like they're not losing money by not charging for the expansions, except for the most recent one because you're paying for your server time or your game time.
Yeah, that's the game that really had a good comeback. I read today
Yes.
it was it's like the most profitable Final Fantasy game to date.
Yeah, no shit. It's been online for, I want to say maybe 7 years.
6 or 7
it's
or
had
8 years,
3 expansions, and then it requires you to pay a monthly subscription for game time. So yeah, no shit, it's the most profitable Final Fantasy game to date. I'm pretty sure you can play the base game in like a Realm Reborn, and then Heaven's Sword. I think you can play up to level 60 for free. That's why I don't think you actually have to pay for that content. I think it's just included for free now, and you just have to pay for the most recent expansion. So yeah, I don't think any other game on the market has demonstrated this sort of a shit show. I'd be somewhat trepidatious when dealing with Bungie and Destiny, given this behavior.
I have to imagine if they were still with Activision, would we have a Destiny 3 at this point and just have not had to deal with this shit?
Oh, yes. Okay, so side tangent. I know this because Maz and I talked about this before.
Right.
The original plan for Destiny
I know how a 10-year
was 2014.
Plan.
Yeah, so you released Destiny in 2014, released 2 expansions, and you released Destiny 2. I believe that was supposed to launch in 2016. And then you released 2 expansions for that, and then you released Destiny 3. I think that was supposed to be 2018. That would carry you through to like 2020. And that was what they were originally planning to do. Destiny 2, I believe, launched a year after when it was supposed to. And then Bungie was like, fuck, we're not doing Destiny 3 when they were already behind. And they just ended up buying back the intellectual property and all the rights from Activision. And Activision was like, fuck you guys, you're not making us enough money. Which, to be fair, Destiny was actually a fucking money pit. I don't know which Chinese company owns Bungie now, but one of them does. At least a partial share in it. Let me check. I don't think it's Tencent. I think it's one of the other conglomerates.
1 hour later.
NetEase owns a portion of Bungie.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
The Chinese mega conglomerate. I think they're primarily a gaming company. I think they specialize mostly in recurring revenue games and mobile games, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Should we use that as the transition?
Yeah, that's actually a really good transition. So,
thank you, Mads, for the question.
thank you, Mans, for the question. Thank you, Megan, for the question. Thank you, Charlie, for the question.
Yes, thank you all.
They were very good hashtag content questions. So, China, I guess over a month ago now, the Chinese government started cracking down on gaming. They put out a statement saying that they thought it was brainwashing the youth, and they wanted to add additional restrictions to playtime for minors. The rules were already pretty strict, but now the rules are such that between 8 and 9 o'clock on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they are allowed to play video games, and that is it. So it's like, when you read the rules, it's like, oh, they can play an hour on the weekends, including Friday. You're like, okay, cool. But it's not like an hour because it's China. You have to play between 8 and 9 o'clock. That is the time you are allowed to play. If you are a minor and you try to play video games at any other time, it just fucking doesn't let you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even like you have an hour every day for those 3 days. It's you have to play during the hour. Otherwise, you do not play. That is it. You have to play during the hour that the government says you're allowed to play in. Take what your opinion of China is from that, but one of the things that I think is most interesting about this is that a lot of bigger companies view China as being the biggest growth market when it comes to video games.
Not anymore.
Well, so that's just it. If you look at the general sales of video games and the amount of growth that the industry has had over the last 5 or 10 years, you can actually notice that the growth has been pretty stagnant outside of the efforts from various different companies to get their games into other markets. Over the last decade, not just the last decade, I would say like the last 15, 20 years, the big push was to get mobile gaming going because that got a demographic that wasn't buying or playing console games or computer games. And the big push now that we have those people playing games is, okay, we need to get to markets where people are typically too poor. They don't have the same wealth equality as North America and most of Europe do. So the 3 big ones, as outlined in Sony's presentation to their investors, and I think that a lot of other companies have similar opinions, are Brazil, Russia, and China. One of the big things here is that typically the video game industry targets a lot of its marketing towards teenage boys. And China just said they're only allowed to play 3 hours of video games a week.
Yeah, that's going to be really tough for them to all compete for those 3 measly hours.
So once they're no longer minors, I don't know at what age China considers
18.
Okay, it is 18?
Under 18s have to follow the new restriction.
Okay. Once you're over the age of 18, you are able to play and buy as many video games as you are able to with your time and money. But for children, that's not the case. So I think what'll be interesting to see is how this affects who companies are going to advertise to, what products they actually decide to release in Chinese markets. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I think Sony was already aiming for an older crowd in general.
I mean, a lot of their games are more mature based.
That doesn't mean anything though. But yeah, it'd be very interesting to see what the long-term implications of this decision are for companies that are trying to expand their business into China, how that will affect their approach to entering the Chinese market and who they're going to advertise to, because advertising to children it's effectively worthless. You're fighting over 3 hours a week,
yeah.
And League of Legends exists, so fucking good luck.
I mean, I don't know what percentage of the population would be under 18, but I mean, 2 billion people.
If they have a similar population distribution to North America, which I imagine they probably do, under 18 would probably be about 20% or less.
That would be 400 million people. Yeah, you're losing out on 400 million potential customers at this point.
Just for context, so Canada has 38 million people living in it as of 2021 census numbers, and then it doesn't have under 18, it has 19 is the thing. So under 19 bracket accounts for about 8 million out of the 38 million. That's 21%. So yeah, if similar to North American countries, then it's probably around 20% of the population that they just won't be able to sell games to. And I got to imagine the upper portion of that, the older portion of the population is not really going to be people who are over the age of 50 or people who are over the age of 30, 45 maybe aren't going to be having games really advertised to them either. So that it really kind of is going to stint the growth of video games, I think, in China.
I mean, to be fair, this is more or less about the online video gaming.
I believe it affects everything because
Okay.
China can tell when you're playing. They blatantly spy
Hmm.
on their entire population. So I have to imagine that like even Steam, if you have like an account and it knows you're a minor, it's gonna
Oh, okay.
kick you
I see
out
what you
if you're
mean.
trying to play
Yeah, and I
during
guess
the
console
time.
gaming isn't as big.
Console gaming's like not a thing there.
Yeah.
It's like Sony's trying to get into China by way of Steam. That's why they're releasing a bunch of their games onto Steam. Because yeah, console gaming is like not a thing necessarily in China because like to get your console released officially, you fundamentally have to like go through Tencent or NetEase or like actually I think it's just those two, and then they can release the console. Otherwise, China will just go, we don't care about your intellectual property laws, and they'll just copy it and release their own like knockoff version of the system. They probably already do that in general anyway, but it's very funny how China gets really offended whenever you copy something from China, but like they just fucking like
I
just
know.
ignore everyone else's copyright law. There's a lot of things I don't like about that country, but I think it's very interesting. Like it'll be interesting to see rather what kind of widespread ramifications this new fundamentally like a war on gaming as far as minors are concerned from China's perspective, how that will affect what companies are doing as they try to expand into China.
Yeah, so it was announced in August, and it was targeted for their essentially what their golden week is. So like, the week that you'd have the most fun. No, 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 you can't have that anymore.
Yeah.
But some of the things that I read were because they can't play the games anymore, they've switched to different forms of entertainment. Like, oh, I'm going to watch this streamer play the game. So I'm just now spending my time just watching someone
China
play
bans
the
Twitch.
game. Would it surprise me? No. They did that?
No, not at all.
Yeah, no. The gaming companies had to implement new policies where the people had to register and log in with their real name and some form of identification.
I thought they were already doing that, but
Apparently, there was new policies.
okay.
And then the other thing that I thought was really funny was there was an increase in people buying adult level accounts
Huh. I
through
wonder
e-commerce
why.
sites. So that they can bypass essentially what the ban is. I'm 16, but I can afford this. Now I can
Yeah.
play games all day. And the government will think it's not
Yeah, I
me.
can't imagine that shit's gonna pan out well in a what is effectively like a military communist state where they spy on you like crazy. But well, it's neither here nor there. That's their decision. They are able to run the risk of having someone break their door down and gun them down. So
To one's their own.
yeah, that is what it is. That's hilarious, though. I didn't think that there would be like an illegal black market for adult accounts now.
Yeah, I found that pretty funny. I was like, that does bypass it. I think China was trying to essentially sue them for it to, stop them.
Oh, and nothing came of this. I did look into this as well. The Chinese government requested that Tencent, because Tencent's making a shitload of money right now, they requested that Tencent slow down the approval process for games and only release games that properly align with Chinese values, whatever the fuck that means. But I didn't see I couldn't find anything in the articles or the press announcement that specifically listed what that was. It was only the new age restriction and the timing restriction that I was able to find information on. So I don't actually know if that
Anything came of that, yeah.
yeah, or if that was just like a generalized warning to Tencent to like just pump the brakes a bit. And that as well would also interfere a bit with companies' abilities to release games into the Chinese market.
Yeah, I'd almost have to imagine there'd be almost kind of like a bribe incentive. Like, we gotta get this X game
Yeah.
out there. And then we're the only one for like this month.
Yeah, Tencent and NetEase are selling the spots to whoever the highest bidder is.
Ugh, that's one way they can make the money back.
I could see them doing it. Hell, I would do that in the same position. Like, okay, if we have a limited number of approvals we can give it every month, then we're going to sell them to whoever the highest bidder is. Fuck it.
It's just going to be interesting to see what kind of switch they're going to have. Because right now, like, all these games, it's like, okay, we can get, like, if you're aiming for that age demographic, now there can't be, like, 10 games that all are fighting over the 3 hours. There's got to be, like, just a few because
Yeah.
there's going to be a dwindling player base.
It's going to be an even worse problem than what people have over here, right? Where it's like fundamentally, if you release a new game for the children demographic, you're automatically going to be competing with Fortnite. That's an inevitability.
Mhm.
So,
It's crazy. I don't know if any other country would try to do this.
no other country would try to do this.
So it's a side tangent before we get into the games we've been playing. But have you heard that EA and the news with FIFA?
Yeah, Matt actually sent that to me as well. I didn't really know if there would be a clean break to talk about it. I think the entire thing's funny. Do you want to
Oh
fill in
yeah, it's
everyone on this
hilarious.
story?
So they're relicensing their contract, and now FIFA, the company, is wanting $1 billion for every 4 years for the license of FIFA, and they want to control what kind of monetization that EA has because they.
Just a bit of clarification there. This is for the name FIFA on the box.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry.
And the monetization stuff is specifically that FIFA, that brand, wants to control the esports and all the merchandising outside of the game instead of having EA be involved with that. So fundamentally, FIFA wants more money.
Mm-hmm.
I think EA is just going to drop them entirely from the thing because this will not affect what leagues and the licenses they have for the different leagues. It'll just affect that it won't have like the World Cup in it at all, and it won't have FIFA on the box. And honestly, I don't think it's worth the money they're asking for.
Not at this point. I mean, maybe it'll be confusing for a couple years to switch, but after that, it's going to pay dividends. I would imagine, especially if EA gets the right marketing out there for their.
Oh, they've already put out a big statement.
No,
about
I
this.
know,
People
but I
are already
mean
gonna know about
the
it.
marketing portion, like because you're gonna be expecting another FIFA game, and you're just like EA plays soccer. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what they will call it, but it'll be something. They can't use Pez, that already exists. But yeah, Maz brought this up. Along with that, he's like, hopefully the money they save dropping the FIFA branding will let them get the last few licenses that Pez has that EA doesn't have, so they can actually have every soccer club. They're missing a few of the clubs from the European League, I believe. And if they got that, then formerly FIFA, the EA soccer game, would be the most complete and well-rounded virtual version of real-world soccer.
Yeah, I just have to imagine, like, because I mean, FIFA won't take this sitting down. They're gonna have to go to it for like a different company to develop this game, or they have the money maybe to do it internally.
They won't be able to because EA still has all the licenses for the teams.
Oh, I'm not thinking about that. Yeah.
The only thing that FIFA has is the brand name of FIFA and the World Cup. And you just cut that shit out entirely because they're asking for too much money.
That's actually hilarious. I wasn't thinking about it in that terms.
Yeah, let me just grab it. Maz actually told me exactly what. The only thing EA are losing would be the FIFA name World Club Cup, the World Cup, and the Women's World Cup. In his opinion, nothing of value.
Which, I mean, they can just make fake substitutes for.
Yeah, that's just it. It's like you're losing out on the men and women's tournament, you're losing out on the club for the tournament, and then you're losing out on the FIFA name. It's not worth what they're asking for, I don't think. EA can totally just pivot the branding for this and then just start advertising it in the current iteration of FIFA. It'll take off. They don't need the fucking name. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I just think it's pretty wild that FIFA thought they could extract more money from EA for this. I have no idea what was going through their minds, but
not this late in the game. If they pulled this off, maybe after a couple years, maybe. But
I think they would have had to have gotten involved with like the esports related stuff from the onset and like had the majority share in it from the onset. The fact that they did not, and EA has control over it, a part of it right now, EA is not going to give that up.
No, not a chance.
Not in a fucking 100 years, so not in 1,000 years. So yeah, I thought this whole situation is actually pretty, well, I think it's comical, but I don't know. It's like watching two kaijus beat the shit out of each other. Like, there's no good here. You just
destruction.
Watch it. It's like when, it's just like when Apple and Epic were fighting, right? Where afterwards, I thought that was fucking funny too, because again, it's just two massive corporations that are getting in a fucking slap fight. It's funny watching them just be like pedantic as hell and just petty towards each other. I don't mind corporate shitposting when all it's aimed at is other corporations.
Yeah, no, I know.
Anyway,
video games.
So yeah, the games we've been playing this week. So I was gonna say I've still been playing Strive, and I don't want to talk about Strive again because all I'm doing is just like going in, practicing things, and then playing matches and trying to like learn matchups. There's like nothing to talk about there. So I have one other game.
I have two.
I mean, if I need to, I can stretch out. There's some stuff I played on Game Pass. I just don't have a lot to say about it.
Another variety hour. Except I don't have that much variety.
Well, I mean, like I said before, I most of the games that I played on Game Pass ranged from like, oh, this is okay, I guess, to like, this offends me. So
Thank God it was $1.
Yeah. I guess it's for people who are curious. I got another thing at Game Pass because Back 4 Blood is out, and one of my buddies wanted to play. Charlie, in fact, wanted to play it. Mm-hmm. Funny thing, though, just to clarify that. So, like, I already had a Game Pass trial for $1. You can get 2 of them. So if you don't know, I was explaining this to Jason before the podcast
very
actually
weird
started.
business practice.
Exceptionally. So there's two different versions of Game Pass. There's Game Pass for PC or for Xbox, and there's Game Pass Ultimate. And the Game Pass Ultimate costs a couple dollars more normally, but the $1 trial for the first month applies to both the platform specific and the Ultimate version. It's not exclusive. Earlier this year, I exercised my $1 trial on Game Pass for PC, and when I went in to get, because I think I was going to have to pay like $15 for another month, and I went in, I saw $15 or $12 or whatever the hell it is in Canadian for the Xbox for PC, but then the Ultimate one still had a $1 price tag, and I went, what the fuck? It's legit. It's on my credit card. It's only showing $1.13 as the charge. So you can cash in on that $1 trial twice. I recommend you do that if you do get a month of Game Pass. I think this service is actually pretty good. But yeah, the Ultimate, I don't necessarily see the value proposition in having it. It has most of the same things as the normal Game Pass, but it includes Xbox Live Gold, and I'm on PC, so I don't think that does anything.
No.
So next time I get a month of Game Pass, I'm going to actually have to pony up more than $1. But I thought it was really odd that $1 first time trial actually applies to both versions, rather than it being an either or choice. Very strange that. Yeah, if you decide to ever partake in Game Pass, highly recommend it. Check out what games are on it before you take the plunge, though.
Yeah, make the best.
Because they're always rotating new stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to make the best of your dollar. Or, if you subscribe again in the future, you want to make the best of your investment in it. But yeah, they're constantly rotating in new titles, and then they've got like their indie titles rather, and then they've got their AAA stuff as their kind of like backbone for the service. So typically I end up grabbing it whenever there's a AAA game I want to play, and then I'll pick up a few indie games that are on there that I've been like, oh, this would be neat to play if I didn't have to pay like a full whatever for it.
And they got that EA Play included as well, so...
Yeah, that's included as well. I do have an EA account, which I discovered earlier this year. Granted, I don't think there's any EA games on here that I actually want to play. I think that Dodgeball game's on here. That would be included, but I don't know. I don't have the desire to play that alone. I could see myself getting really into that if I had two other people who would play with me. Anyway, that's Game Pass. I have just been going through and games that are on that. And Rift Breakers, or the Rift Breaker rather, just came out like today. And I saw that it's on Game Pass. So I'm like, ooh, I guess I'll download that since I have Game Pass until November 12th, I think. Or 11th. Either or.
Whatever. Mid-November.
Yeah. I'll be playing Back 4 Blood with Charlie and maybe, I guess, Thomas on Fridays, because that is the only time our schedules actually sync up since he's like 13 hours away in Australia. I think that's going to be a fun time. Playing games with Charlie is always fun. It'll be good times.
Okay, I'll start with my big chungus game, which is the Lost Judgment.
This is a sequel, right?
This is a sequel to Judgment.
Which is a
spin-off. Or Judge Eyes, as it was called in Japan, which is, a spin-off, as you were saying, to the Yakuza series. And unfortunately, it does not live up to the same standards that I'd say the Yakuza games strive for. So what I mean by that is Yagami as a character is fine.
What is Yagami? Is that the main character's name?
That's the main character's name. That's the detective that you play as, who is ex-lawyer because of insert plot points here from the previous game.
Okay.
It's beneficial that you play the first game, but it's not 100% mandatory. Like, enough is kind of explained about the characters that you'll kind of get what their role is, but if you want the full story, it's beneficial to play the first game. But game it feels like almost really disconnected. It's just like, this was a case, and then this was a case. It's not like a continuous storyline where I'd say like 1 to 2 was, even though I think it was like a year apart, it was like, it felt like it was just a big continuation of the story, and so on with the rest of the games. Because even like the events from 5 leading into 6, like the beginning portion made sense with like where Kiryu was, what happens in 5 near the end, and then what's continuing on in 6. Whereas this, I just feel it's just another big case, and I'm like, okay, it's just another episode.
So it's kind of like, I was gonna say, it's kind of like a television show. It's like Friends. Or like The Office, where you can drop in and kind of just watch wherever, and you'll sort of get the gist of what's going on, because most of the stuff is completely disconnected.
Yeah, but what's even funnier is each chapter has like a previously on, where it just like has like a minute like kind of summary of the chapter. even though you've played that chapter, like, and it's not like you just started the game up again and then it's like recapping you.
How curious.
It's once you've gone from chapter to chapter, it's like previously on, and then it just like summarizes what happened, and I'm like, Yagami must discover the evil truths hidden behind such events, and I'm like,
So
why is this a thing? This seems silly.
Disgaea kind of does something like that, but it's very light, and most of the time they use like the in-betweens as moments to like set up, like to do exposition dumps about like things that are going on in the story that you don't necessarily need, like that the player needs to be aware of, but not like that doesn't necessarily need to be playing out in real time.
But these are like all cutscenes that are from the like what you've been watching before, and it's like,
that's weird.
Why is like it's only half a minute to a minute, but I just found it silly. Like I just wanted to move on to the next chapter pretty quickly. I don't know if there would have been a way for it to like be programmed to like do that only if the players have been gone for a while.
There's definitely a way to do that because Pokemon figured it out a decade ago. One of the features they had in Leaf Green, Fire Red, and I believe also the Generation 4 games. When you haven't played for a while, it shows you like the last 5 or 4 or 5 major things that you did.
Milestones, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, this is what you were doing last time. So you can kind of be like, oh yeah, that's what I was doing last time. Okay, I know what I wanted to do thing X and Y next.
I beat Giovanni. I caught this on route such and such. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I thought that was really neat at the time.
Yeah, and then for like Generation 4, they had like a notebook that showed kind of every major thing and with a date, so you could kind of scroll through I think it shows you like the last 5, but you could go further back if you needed to. And that would give you context for kind of like what you've been doing and like what. So it'd be like, oh, this Pokemon evolved. You beat this gym leader. You beat your rival on this route. You beat the evil team on this thing. It's like, okay, I know what I was doing. And I would only play that if you hadn't played in a couple of days, based on the DS's system clock. So it's like, oh, you haven't played in 3 days? Here's the last thing you were working on, just as like a brief refresher, so you like have context before you start playing. Which is actually pretty good to have in an RPG, but yeah, it's really weird that they previously on Judgement every single time you hit like a new chapter.
Yeah, pretty much that. I know it's like a quick summary, but it just felt like it was out of place. Like the other games didn't really do that, and I don't remember if Judgement did it, like the original one, so just felt like a silly addition. But what's not a silly addition is the snake style, which I really, really enjoy.
So it's a fighting style, yeah?
Yeah, the first game came with 2, which was Crane, which is for dealing with large crowds of people. So it's a lot of like swinging legs around and like running around.
At the speed of sound, got no place to go, gotta follow my rainbow.
I mean, this is a Sega game.
50 good boy or good girl points to anyone who knows what that is a reference to. Continue.
And then the Tiger style is the more like one-on-one. I'd say it's a bit similar to like the Breaker style from Yakuza 0 in terms of like it deals a lot of damage.
Majima's breakdancing style?
No, I'm thinking of Kiryu's heavy one. I'm
it's
blanking
Beast,
on what
isn't
the
it?
name is. Beast, thank you.
You're welcome. I as soon as you said that, I'm like, that can't be right. You're
No.
probably thinking of like Beast style or something, or Brawler or something. Yeah, I like the Beast style. It was good shit.
Yeah, the Tiger style for Yagami is it's good for one-on-one fights, so that's the one that you're going to be kind of using for more boss fights over the Crane style, which, as I said earlier, is for crowds.
More crowd control stuff, yeah.
Yeah, but then the Snake style is reminiscent of one of the styles from Yakuza 4, which was you have the ability to pretty much parry every attack and like make them continue on the same direction and then just wail on them. So it's a really defensive style, but offensively it's still fucking strong as hell. So it's almost kind of broken in certain terms. Like there's some boss fights where I just primarily used that one just so that I would dodge their regular attacks and then I'd like rush out of the way for some of their heavier attacks that couldn't maybe be dodged by the move. Because the block has basically been replaced with a parry, so if you time it wrong, they'll like hit you and wail on you pretty hard, so it's kind of a risk and reward style. But as soon as you get the timing down, you can just like destroy an entire health bar on a boss and just be like, I haven't been hit once. Haha! This is not broken at all. And the cool part is if you perform really well with this style is that the enemies will be very fearful of you. But also if you do that performing well in the other styles and then switch over, then you do some sort of like kind of like a gotcha special heat move where it's like you almost punch them in the face, but just not quite. Like you almost hit their nose and then they faint, like the anime style.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, the anime like I would punch you, but you stop like a
Or like
hair from their face.
instead you punch the wall right beside their head and they're like,
Oh yeah, but the camera angle makes it look like you just brutalized the person. It's melted their face.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. That's always fun.
There's one where like he's almost gonna kick him in the face, like the guy's on the ground, and then like Yakumi just like slaps the guy's face, like, ha, joke. It's really funny. Like I really enjoy those ones. There's not an insane amount of them, so I kind of wish that part was a little bit more fleshed out, but they are really enjoyable and add to the overall experience. Basically, it's called a surrender instead of like you defeated the enemy. But one thing, and I don't remember if the original did it, but one thing that the game did was that the combat for all like the special points that you'd accumulate to buy more of the skills and unlock some of the special moves, stat upgrades, whatnot, was that if you performed a variety of different like specials or like combos or used the different styles between the enemies, then you'd get more points. So I really liked that system because before it would be like, oh, okay, I'm just going to use the crane style all for this fight, or I'm just going to use the tiger style for all this fight. Now you're actively being encouraged to switch styles on the fly. Like, first enemy will be like the crane, then the next one will be the tiger, then the following one will be the snake. So you're constantly switching, and I think that the system that they've added in really kind of helped with that, because then you get more skill points quicker. I think once you max out them, it's like 40 for the first crane kill, 40 for the first tiger kill, and then 40 for the snake. Once you've done all of those, you get 200 points. Like, master of all of them. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I should do that over and over again for each fight. EX actions are still as flashy as can be, so that's always a great thing to see versus like a dragon. I know all those moves are essentially specials that you're doing with the skills, but it's a bit more special in Lost Judgment. Now, the plot.
I was gonna say, the combat sounds like it's pretty all right.
Yeah, it's good. It's still fun. It's the same old, same old. It can be pretty easy on mob enemies, but boss fights it can be a bit more intense.
Yeah, I assume based on what you said before, the story's just like a bunch of different cases that are strung together. Or is there like some kind of overarching narrative?
There is an overarching case that pretty much shows its hand by about the second or third chapter. So it does kind of get there quickly, but the first case is all about like dealing with school bullying. And I'm like, what? This is weird. And then eventually over time you start to understand why it did that premise. But for the first chapter, I was very kind of like confused about like, why is this happening? The thing with the bully part is, at a certain point, it feels really disconnected, and then they kind of shovel the characters back near the end, and I'm like, but why? But why? They didn't need to be here for the last chapter. Like, once I got to chapter 6, they were pretty much just, or 6 or 7, they were pretty much just gone from the rest of the story, and then they come back right at the 13th chapter, and I'm like, they didn't really do anything, so why again? Was this just to add more content, or it just... Certain beats of the story just felt like they didn't need to be there. I think there was there was almost a little bit too much padding that made the story not flow very well. And one of the things that I'm not the most fond of is they split because like the next best thing about Yakuza style games is that there's all the side stories.
Yeah.
They split that between school stories and the side stories. So the side stories, there's about 40 of them in the base game. And what I mean by base game is because North America and the rest of the world would get it after Japan got it, they would get all the DLC, which included some story stuff. But since it's a worldwide release, everyone's on an even playing field. So now there's an expansion pass. So this one doesn't feel nearly as content rich in that terms as previous games. Which is kind of unfortunate because I think what was provided, while still good and still was, I think my first playthrough was still around the 40 hours with doing a little bit of the side stuff and a little bit of the school stories stuff. So you still get your money's worth, but I don't think what was presented in terms of the story was really worth it. I think if you gotta play one of these games in this current engine, I'd say play Yakuza Kiwami 2 or Yakuza 6. Those games, in terms of the side content, I think is a lot better. And some of the side content can be really fucking funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm having a tough decision about like even putting it on like the top 5 games of the year that we're going to do at the end. I don't think it beats out Judgement.
That's crazy to me because it's like the only 2021 game you've played so far this year, and you got it on launch, and you're just like, yeah, it's like okay, but I don't know.
I think when Judgement came out, it was like, oh, this is a fresh coat of paint, like fresh, new, and I don't feel like the sequel was that game-changing.
I see.
Which is really unfortunate. So this one also goes into Ijincho, like the Yokohama area.
Oh, okay. That's Like a Dragon's.
Yeah, it's the same world. They've kind of resolved a little bit of the traveling because you can go anywhere with a cab right away.
Thank fucking Christ. Holy shit.
Really silly that they didn't include. At least when you got near a cab, you had to fucking interact with it. That's so stupid.
It actually interact with it. That was the dumbest ass system in the world. I didn't even realize that. So like, I was halfway through the game and I didn't have like any of the fast travel stuff. And I'm like, why don't I have any of the fast travel? And you're like, oh, you got to talk to them. I'm like, what? Exquaz?
Yeah, it's pretty damn stupid. So you can easily get around the map. You always have enough money for the cabs and whatever. Because you don't have to buy equipment. Well, you can buy some equipment, but it's like, 8% more attack power, but you don't really need it because...
Oh, joy. My favorite types of upgrades.
Well, that's just
Have I complained about that yet on the podcast?
Probably.
Okay.
But one thing that they did to resolve kind of the getting around quicker is that on any main road, you can now use a skateboard to go a little bit faster. It wasn't meaningfully faster because after I finished this, I had a few questions about some of the new areas that they introduced. So I loaded up Like a Dragon just for a couple hours and was like, okay, this area. I wonder if the high school has actually been developed in that area. Nope. It's just a bunch of random buildings there. And some of the other key areas, I was like, oh, so this feels a little disconnected. I know I'm being nitpicky, but a lot of the areas are the same. But they've blocked off portions of the map that I found interesting. Like they blocked off where the Yakuza is, like the Yakuza for that region, like headquarters.
Oh, the Yakuza headquarters. Oh, that makes sense.
And then the romance workshop, they blocked that off.
They didn't block off that entire side of the map.
They blocked off portions of the map, but it feels kind of like abrupt where they've done it. Like there's just something in the way.
This is a random dead end and a bunch of cars are in the way. That's odd.
Yeah, one's just there's a dump truck there constantly, not doing its job, picking up garbage. It's just constantly there blocking your way.
It's not his job. His job is to run over homeless people. Didn't you play Yakuza Like a Dragon?
Fair enough.
I did. I got run over by so many dump trucks. I was the king of cans, though. That minigame was fucking hilarious.
That minigame was pretty funny.
Speaking of, I assume that this has like a lot of the same minigames.
It's mostly the same minigames.
I mean, obviously the homeless people can collecting isn't in there.
So the school stories is where a lot of the new minigames are. So the dancing one is essentially just DDR karaoke style, like just click all the buttons when they drop down. Yeah, more DDR.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
There's a boxing minigame, which is actually pretty damn good. Just one-on-one fights. You got the jab, you got the sucker punch, you got the side jab and all that stuff. That one's actually pretty damn good. There's an esports club that only plays...
Do they play League of Heroes?
No. They don't play a unique game. They play a Sega game. They play Virtual Fighter 5.
Ew! No! No one plays Virtua Fighter. No one.
And they're going to do it competitively, and I'm like, what?
They're going to do it competitively in person because that game has dog shit netcode. Sorry, people who like Virtua Fighter. That game should have been released with rollback. Instead, it's going to be lost to the annals of history. Side tangent. I know I keep saying annals wrong, but I think it's funny to say annals instead. Continue.
So many citations.
I'm fully aware of what I'm saying.
So instead of like there's being a hostess club, there's like essentially a girl bar where you just talk to the women and buy drinks.
Okay, hold on. That's...
maybe you occasionally play darts with them, and then they're like, "Oh, you beat me! Damn it!"
I just.
This is the second lost cousin to Yakuza, the game.
Yeah, but I can't get my head around like why, with regard to the bar stuff. It's just so. I just feel so cringeworthy.
Yeah, a little bit. Because Yagami's a good boy. He doesn't want his game to be on PC because then
Titty mods.
yeah, mods and oh no, the model for him doesn't want that to be a thing.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Everyone's afraid of nudie mods on PC, which is 100% going to happen. Every game that you can put mods into has a naked mod. It doesn't matter. Everyone's full-time horny. Doesn't matter how stupid that is. Okay, hold on a second. Did I ever
Is
show
this
you
a side
the
tangent?
fucking... Yes, this is a side tangent. Did I ever show you the Monster Hunter mod that makes your hunter's ass
What the
huge?
fuck are you talking about? No. Why?
Um,
I mean, you've already explained that, but
yeah, it's only because it's funny. It's not like horny. This is comedy. You can continue talking. I'm gonna find
okay.
this.
There's like a robotics club, which is just, it's not even as fun as I was hoping it would be. It's not like you're fighting one-on-one robot fights. You built, it's like a team of 3, and then it's like, put the puzzle pieces down and try and, it's not even like I would say it was like competitive Tetris, but it's just, I don't know, it's just meh. So a lot of these things are kind of hit or miss in terms of the school story stuff, and you have to like, you can't just be like, oh, okay, I want to do this school story. You have to interact with like the dancing one first, and then that one will slowly unlock the other ones. I kind of wish it was designed in such a way where you could pick which club you were interested in the most to investigate, because the overarching thing in the school stories is that there's some evil mastermind behind everything, and he's kind of giving the students access to like essentially illegal services. Like, I want to be the best esports player at Virtua Fighter, so please give me a cheat so that I can
That's some scrub quote shit right there.
well, I'm just gonna put spoilers because cheat is that the other character will have input delay, and I'm like, of course.
Yeah. I'll cheat by playing on Wi-Fi.
Funny part being, I found, because I've played the Virtual Fighter 5 in the Yakuza series games before, so I know how to completely break the AI. It's just
No.
the PS4, or PS5, it's XX, 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 and you just keep doing that. I broke it so hard that I won in the fight that I was not supposed to win in, and then instead it went round 3, and I'm like, I've already won 2 rounds. What the fuck?
Sorry, read the mod. The video of it got taken down. It doesn't exist anymore.
Oh no.
That's what I was saying no about. I was so disappointed. The comically large butt cheeks are gone.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the whole game is just fucking shit broke, is what you're trying to tell me.
The Virtual Fighter 5 part I found it really funny that I just broke it, and I won the fight that I wasn't supposed to win because like I get the input delay, but I'd have enough, like I do enough damage that I'd countered the amount of like input delay and then them wailing on me. So like it was close, but I won, and it's like round 3, and I'm like, I won 2 rounds and he won 1. No, that's not how this works. And then I did it one more time, and it was like round 3, and I'm like, this is stupid. What the fuck? Why would it do this? The cheat isn't that he's got input delay. The cheat is that the game never ends if I win. It only ends when he wins 2 rounds. So I found that kind of funny. I think I might have a video that I captured of that. I need to double check that out, but I found that really, really funny.
So in general, it's more Yakuza, but not necessarily the same caliber.
It doesn't reach the same heights. There are moments in the side story stuff. There's mechanics that were from the first game that were used heavily, and they're used very sparingly in here, in good ways and bad ways. There's like a lockpicking one that I didn't find too annoying in the first one. But like, so you probably know that like tailing is like the worst thing in the world in any video game.
Yeah, trailing missions are dog shit.
Yeah. In this one, there's only one in the main story, and then the rest of it is divvied between side story content and the school stories. So I thought that was actually a good decision. And it's only in like the first main chapter that you have to do a trailing mission. It's basically just a tutorial, so you can't really fail that one. I liked that they did that. There are chases in both main story and the side content. Those are fun. They're flashy and actiony enough. They're mostly just quick time events, but with a little bit of like input, but for the most part they're at least fun to interact with. But some of the new additions just didn't hit really well in my opinion. So it's a good game, but it's hard for me to recommend it. I would recommend Yakuza
the
games
Yakuza
more
games
than
over this.
over than
Yeah,
this.
I got that
I'm
impression.
not sad if this is the last Judgment game. I think Sega could possibly do better than this.
All right.
Anyway, what's yours?
All right, I'm going to talk about my one game. So, Megan, again, from Megan Plays Games.
What'd she make you do?
She's been trying to get me and other people to play Pokémon Unite since it's free to play and Miranda has Switch Online to play Monster Hunter with Mum. I was like, oh, fuck it. I guess I'll make an account. She's like, you gotta be on my account to do it. I'm
So
like,
you
okay.
didn't do it on like iOS and Android?
My phone's a piece of shit.
Okay. I don't know your phone.
I bought
Dude,
I
haven't
bought like
seen you
a.
in like 2 years.
Oh, I guess that's true. So when I switched over to a smartphone, because I had a flip phone until like, 2019. I had a
Boomer.
flip phone from when did I start college?
2011, 2012.
I believe I started college in 2011. So yeah, I had a flip phone as my first cell phone in 2011, and then I bought a smartphone in 2019. I think that's correct. I still don't entirely know how to use this device, but it texts and takes phone calls, which is what I needed to do. But yeah, I bought the cheapest phone I could find, which was
Gotcha.
It was a Motorola model. It was only like $200 after tax. It's not built for doing anything aside from phone calls and texting.
Mm-hmm.
It's a phone. Imagine that.
Anyway.
Yeah, so I downloaded Pokemon Unite on the Switch,
Mm-hmm.
and I played it with Megan. I played it with her sister as well.
And how are you finding it?
I'm already bored of it.
Well, that's not surprising.
I've played it for a little over a week. Over the long weekend, I got quite a few hours into it. So I think I've played it for about 20 to 25 hours. I've played 100 matches, or maybe a little over 100, or a little under 100. Every match feels exactly the same, which is really surprising in a multiplayer game. So the game was designed to be extremely approachable.
Mm-hmm.
A big thing that I think a lot of companies found is when League of Legends really popped off and became one of the most successful games ever, a lot of companies were like, ooh, we need to have a MOBA. So you saw like in 2012 to 2015, a bunch of companies were like, we're making a MOBA.
Yeah, a
or
big
something
surge
that's
of
quasi
games, yeah.
MOBA. Yeah, and some of those games just like came out and immediately got dumpstered. And some of those games are still around, like Smite.
Mm-hmm.
But the overwhelming consensus from console people was, this genre is scary. I don't want to do anything with it. It's a genre that is probably one of the more complex, or at least considered one of the more complex, because it started as a Warcraft 3 mod called Defense of the Ancients, which was the prototype that became Dota 2.
Yeah, that's why Blizzard implemented some policies where it's like, if you make a game type,
Yeah,
you own
when
that.
they remastered Warcraft 3, they didn't want to get fucked
Yeah.
out of having a runaway success game again,
Yeah.
which required them to make Heroes of the Storm their own MOBA instead of just having Dota. Dota is probably the most complex MOBA because it's based on a fucking custom game map from Warcraft 3. So there's a bunch of rules and mechanics in it that only make sense. They're not designed, they're just there. And a bunch of people just kind of accepted that they're just there. And those became the de facto mechanics of the genre. So basically, like, League of Legends and Dota are two extremely complicated games. And when you think about, like, why is this designed in this way? The answer is because that's what was in the Warcraft mod, instead of because of X, Y, and Z reason. Now, there are a bunch of things that do help to add depth and complexity to the games because of that, like, for example, last-hitting minions. And in Dota, you can even last-hit your own minions to deny enemy farm, but some games have decided that maybe having some of these mechanics doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So one of the big changes that Heroes of the Storm made was that instead of having individual EXP, the entire team shares EXP. This puts a lot more focus on controlling certain map objectives because they're usually worth a lot of experience points, and they're very good for maintaining momentum and pressure against your opponent. It also should help to facilitate better team play. It doesn't, speaking from experience. And then Pokemon Unite takes things kind of a step further to approachability that is generally lacking from a lot of these games. So instead of having 4 different skills, your characters only have 2. Most of everything is auto-aimed because it's on a console. You can custom aim stuff, but the auto-aiming is
Works.
always prioritized, and it works okay. It's not great. It works fine-ish. You don't have to take out towers. Instead, you score shots on goals, and instead of farming creeps in lane, the creeps, air quotes, are spread out throughout the map. You still have the basic idea of like gathering experience and denying experience and trying to get advantage and pressing advantage. And then like the further you get into your opponent's side of the map, the more dangerous any kind of assault becomes because the map is designed in such a way that it favors the defender and makes it more dangerous for the offensive person because there's a bunch of obscured vision points where someone can jump out and gank your ass.
Because you're going into enemy territory.
Yeah, fundamentally. But yeah, it's very pared back from what I'm used to.
Right, as a veteran of Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah, it's like I played 500 hours of Heroes of the Storm, and most of my matches in Heroes of the Storm felt different. Either because of the different maps that were in play, or the different characters that were in play, or the different team compositions we had. And in Pokémon Unite, all my matches feel exactly the same, regardless of who I play, or who's on our team, or what we're doing.
So you would like always go bottom lane or something like that, or?
No, I've played top, bottom, and mid. Okay. And it always feels exactly the same. When the objective on the bottom lane spawns, you go to the bottom lane. When the objective in the top lane is there, you maybe take the top one. And the last 2 minutes, everyone goes mid because Zapdos is in mid.
Yeah. Speaking of Zapdos, yeah.
That is the other thing that's really weird about the game, is that like it heavily rewards losing until the final 2 minutes. So in the final 2 minutes, all points scored, because you have like dunk points in these fucking like basketball style hoops, are doubled. The last 2 minutes of the game are fundamentally that's the only time in the game that actually matters. You can be winning for like the first 8 minutes and have like a huge lead on your opponents, and if you shit the bed in the last 2 minutes, the enemy team will win. I know this because I have been on teams that were completely shitting the bed until the last 2 minutes, and then I partly hard carried the team to a victory.
That's crazy.
One of the really interesting mechanisms that runs counter to I think what this is this system is intended to do. So the further into enemy territory you get, the harder it is to score. The final net on either team is right outside the spawn point, so it's really hard to score on because people can just like pop out of spawn and shank your ass. And then the two that precede that, you can like fast travel to them from the base. So they're pretty easy to defend as well. The furthest out ones are very difficult to defend. Theoretically, if you just leave both of them up until the last 2 minutes, you can score 2 massive point totals in either goal. Because like normally they disappear after you score 100 points, but it will count all of the shots that you've taken into them. So if you get like the first 99 points on the goal and then do a 50-point dunk in the last 2 minutes, you just scored 199 points in that goal. And it's not exactly the easiest goal for your opponents to defend. I've actually had a number of games where we were doing so bad we didn't even take out any of our opponent's goals, and I just went and dunked like 100 points to finish off whatever goal was there, and like the enemy team had no way to defend it. And then someone else had the same idea, so they did it, and then we immediately like tied the scores back up, even though we played like shit for the first 8 minutes. Fundamentally, in the like first 10-15 seconds of the last 2 minutes, we tied up the score.
That sounds really broken.
Because of how... Yeah, it's the comeback mechanics in this game are like way too swingy. And then Zapdos itself, when you kill it, it goes to whoever last hits it, which means that you can snipe it from the enemy team, which I have done before. And then your entire team gets like an extra 25 of the thing to score.
It's not even like a percentage of like what?
Nope.
Oh god,
nope.
That makes more sense.
Whoever last hits it.
Boo.
And then all the goals become instantly scoreable on. So instead of like, normally you have to like charge up shots, and the more energy you're trying to dunk, the longer it takes to score. But when you get Zapdos,
button press.
Yeah, you just press the button, it goes in. So everyone can just butt rush the enemy and just drop them in. I have won Zapdos so many times and been the only person from my team who ran in and scored on the enemy. It is so frustrating when you see your entire team running around with 50 fucking points and just like none of them go and dunk for 100. And when we get Zapdos, I'm like, what are you chuckle fucks doing?
It's time to destroy the enemy team.
Yeah, basically.
That doesn't sound fun to me.
It's not. It's fun for a little bit, and sometimes it's very hilarious unintentionally, but it's like there's like no competitive integrity in this game because of how swingy it gets. And then a lot of the matches feel very similar. There are different archetypes for the different characters, but fundamentally everyone's a damage dealer. So there's damage class, which specializes in damage. There is speed class, which also specializes in damage. There is an all-arounder class, which also specializes in damage. There is a support class, which has some support-based moves, but also does damage. And there is a tanking class, which has some tank-style support moves and also does damage. It is very doable with nothing but attack-oriented items to turn every single character in this game into a 15-kill monster-stomping machine. Although, obviously, the glass cannons are going to be a little more efficient at killing things. But that said, I've seen a number of people who will top the kill scoreboard with tanks or supports because they give them nothing but damage items. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. I've done that before playing a support character, so there you go. Just feels like everything is the same and it doesn't matter what we bring into the map and it doesn't really matter how we play except in the last 2 minutes. So
that's not what you want.
No, and it's like even playing other characters, I'm like, ooh, this character's skills are neat, but then it's like a lot of them are things I've seen before in other games. It's just like a really simplified version of it because of like the auto aiming. Oh, okay, this is this skill and this is this skill and this is this skill. It's like fine. I think it's like a good introductory point for people who've never played a MOBA before because it actually teaches you the fundamentals of like what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it. Like denying EXP from the enemy is a big part of the game, and pushing your advantage is another big part of the game, and not going balls to the walls and rushing in like a fucking Goomba is also a part of the game. Like taking educated risks about when to commit and when not to commit is part of the game.
But after like 100 hours or
100
games,
matches,
it's like find a new mode.
Yeah. So I've actually really appreciated that they have quick mode, and the quick mode is like the fun maps. There's like the standard mode, which you can play, which is whoever. And then there's a ranked mode, which is just a standard mode, but you have a player rank. Player ranks don't mean a whole lot. It doesn't matter what rank the people on your team are. They're all stupid. They're always all stupid. No joke. I was playing in like the second lowest rank. I don't think I made it out of the second lowest rank because I just got tired of playing the game. But I had someone who was supposedly 2 ranks higher than me on my team, and they did the worst. They just fed the entire time. What are you doing? Like, how are you even this high? Like, what is going on? Everyone on this team is, like, supposed to be bullshit rank, and you're supposed to be 2 ranks higher, and all you're doing is, like, feeding this people. What are you doing? So, yeah, everyone who plays, or not everyone, but, like, a lot of people who play this game are completely brain dead. But, yeah, I've really enjoyed the alternative modes, which they cycle out every couple of, I want to say every couple of days, but I'm not sure because I'm only able to play on weekends. So every time I, like, log in, it's always something new. That has, like, ARAM, and it also had this map that I thought was really cool. There's like 2 different goals at either side of the map, and when your team scores twice consecutively, then it doubles the points, and you can keep a 2 times multiplier going as long as the enemy team doesn't score on it, or you don't have the 2 times bonus fade away after 15 seconds. So I thought that was really cool because it was like we were like strategically planning out like, okay, I have more points than you. You score, and then I'll get the double points, and then afterwards we just gotta keep the combo going for as long as possible by chaining together like whatever we can, like run out, grab points, and then like run back here and score them as quickly as possible. So like I had a lot of fun playing that mode because it was just like, really goofy. And then like obviously ARAM is always fun. That's all random, all middle, so it's just 1 lane. So that's a shit show map. There's a third one I haven't played because it didn't come up whenever I was playing. But yeah, I really enjoyed goofing around with those. They were actually like a breath of fresh air instead of just playing literally the exact same map in either ranked or unranked. I think that's the other thing that is really shitty for me is that in Heroes of the Storm there was like 17 different maps, all with different ways that the lanes were oriented and different team-based objectives, which would require you to figure out not just how to play your character, but you had to play to the map you were on, and that added some different decision-making and micro and macro play into every game you were playing, instead of it just being like, ah yes, it's time for Dreadnought to spawn. Everyone go to the bottom lane. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've just played a more involved version of this and already know how to play it. So when I played a really pared back version of it, I'm like, I'm kind of bored already. It had some novelty for a little bit, I will say. It's really cool seeing the Pokemon beat the shit out of each other. The game looks really nice. The moves are animated really nice. It runs like shit. So by default, it's recommended to keep it at 30 FPS. And I'm like, that's weird. Can I make it 60? I made it 60. And the 60 it's not consistent. It actually dropped to like 15 at one point. And I'm like, oh man, even if this was running at like the 30 mode, this would probably have happened still. Because everyone used their ultimate at like the exact same time. So it's just a bunch of fucking like light effects everywhere. And I'm like, oh god, I can't even sense this visual diarrhea at that point.
Switch. Oh god.
Yeah, it's just particle effects and it's just diarrhea Christmas
PS4
lights
can handle
everywhere.
that.
So, if you've never played a MOBA before, I assume that it's... Well, I'm not going to say I assume it's fun. I know Megan's had a lot of fun playing it. But I've played more involved things than this. And I don't enjoy playing a really simplified version of it.
Gotcha.
That and like just the auto aiming also pisses me off so much. It's so hard to lead your attacks when you have to aim with the fucking second stick instead of just clicking where you know your opponent's going to go and having the attack go where you click. And for some reason, even though the touchscreen works when you're reporting somebody, which I have had to do numerous times, the touchscreen doesn't work in the actual game itself, which just boggles my mind. I just don't understand why this, like the Switch has a touchscreen. Why doesn't the touchscreen work? Because I would love to just be like, oh yeah,
That's
click
really
button
weird
and then
because
click
you'd think
screen.
they have to do that already.
Yep,
because
that's
it's
what
the Android,
the mobile.
Yeah.
Yep, I don't understand.
That's very bizarre.
Here's the other thing that's really bizarre. So like the matches are boxed to 10 minutes, which I think is a really good design decision because a lot of MOBAs tend to run compared to other multiplayer games, they're really long matches.
Yeah.
A fighting game match, a typical set for me in Guilty Gear is like 3 to 5 minutes a person, and like that's it.
Yep.
And that's like 3 full fucking games against one person.
Makes sense.
Most MOBAs, Heroes of the Storm runs about 25 minutes per game. League of Legends is about an hour, and Dota can run like over an hour regularly. That's a long time to play one match. So they've actually time boxed the matches. The random weird maps are 5 minutes, and the standard mode is 10 minutes. So that really you're looking at like a 10-minute game every single time. Despite being a 10-minute game, every single time, people AFK so much in this game, and I don't understand why. Because in like League of Legends or Heroes or Dota, if you AFK, your team will lose faster, which means that the game will be over faster. Which means there's a material benefit if you don't want to like deal with like a lot of negative penalties for quitting out and getting put in quitter's queue. You could just like sit in base and wait for the match to end, and then the match will end faster. In Pokémon Unite, the match always takes 10 minutes.
Unless there's a surrender, right?
Yeah, there is a surrender option, but like I've never had a surrender option. I've had people surrender to me. I've never been on a team that was surrendering. Probably because I never vote to surrender.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, we're gonna stay here. We're gonna finish because the comeback mechanics mean we can still win this fucking shit. But yeah, in the 500 hours I played Heroes of the Storm, I can count the number of times I had AFK happen on both my hands. So like it was less than 10 times in 500 hours. I'm gonna say like around like 100 matches of fucking Pokemon Unite, I've run out of fingers already.
Oh no.
There is so many times where someone has AFK'd during a match. And I don't understand what the fucking mindset of these people are. It's 10 fucking minutes. It's not a big deal. I don't understand who these fucking people are who just like...
Kids?
I don't know, man. Like, these people will be in these matches for like 2.5 minutes and they'll just AFK for the rest of the next 7.5 minutes. I'm like, what the fuck?
I'd have to say it's kids because they're just like, this is not going well. Meh.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It's and then you can report them for AFKing and then they can get banned from playing ranked. It's actually not hard. It only takes 2 reports and you're banned from playing ranked.
Oh, wow.
And if you get 4, then you're banned from playing the entire game. So I'm like...
You gotta buy a whole nother Switch now.
Fundamentally, I just don't... I'm like, who the fuck are these people? Like, it's just... There's no material benefit. It's only 10 minutes. It's not even that long. Like, and there's huge comeback mechanics. We can still win.
Yeah.
We just have to play good in the last 2 minutes. It's the only part of the game that matters. Like, I just don't understand these people who are just like, nah, I'm just going to not play. Like, every time it happens, I'm like, fuck you people. Honest to God, it's the most frustrating thing. You'd think with shorter matches, people wouldn't quit out. Like, they wouldn't rage quit so easily, and they just play the fucking match and they'd be like, alright, whatever, next match. Right?
No, we have no attention span.
No, it's the games that actually have longer matches that have better player retention because people aren't willing to just give up. Because they're like, well, I'm stuck in here for another 20 fucking minutes, so I better make the best of it. Now, in Pokemon Unite, people are like, fuck this. After like the first 2 minutes, they're just not happy with how things are going. They just stop playing. I'm like, God damn it, fuck all you people. But yeah, that's like my big experience with it. Is like, it's like the game's like okay, it's not really for me, and it's like full of people who just fucking rage quit and AFK. Like, it's not really AFK, it was like away from controller, so it'd be AFC, but instead of away from keyboard. But yeah, it's mind-boggling how often this shit happens. Once every like 5 games I play, someone would just fucking AFK. It's so frequent. I just don't understand it.
Oh, glad you're not playing it anymore.
I mean, if Megan asks to play, I will hop on and play some more matches with her, because playing matches with her was fine. I like playing these types of games with like a full stack. Obviously, we don't have like a full. It's her sister and me. That's only 3 people, right? So it's not a full stack. But the game's so fucking simple. It is like whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I guess Megan listens to the podcast. Sorry, Megan. I've just like I had more time to play it and more time to think on it, and I'm like, I don't really know if I'm having that much fun playing this. It's fine for what it is. It's just it's not for me.
Good as an introduction to the genre.
Yeah, it definitely. I think it hits all the approachability milestones it needs to for people who never played MOBA before to like go in and understand the mechanics and the flow of a MOBA match. It's just that there's not enough variety, and the matches they all feel very samey to me. That and people AFK all over the place, which is weird. That's kind of like where I'm at with the game, really. I don't know, if you're into Pokemon, you've never played a MOBA before, check it out. It's free. The only thing you can lose is time, so you'll know pretty quickly if you don't like it.
Okay. The other game I had was The Surge 2. So I played this probably like 3 or so weeks ago. It's actually a really, really good sequel to what was an okay game.
I was going to say, isn't The Surge kind of mediocre?
Surge was kind of mediocre. It was the first, obviously, in that. Well, actually, it wasn't the first game from the Deck 13. I think they made Lords of the Fallen.
That game is widely regarded as being a piece of shit.
Yeah, and then The Surge, which was better, and then The Surge 2, which was so far the best. So system-wise, I'd say it's still the same kind of mechanics that you've got. So the thing that separates this from other Dark Souls games, because this is pretty much Dark Souls with a different skin and slightly different mechanics, but you can aim for certain parts of an enemy, and then so you can get like, I can get their helmet, or I can get their augmented arms or legs or the torso or whatever you're trying to aim for. And it requires, well, actually it doesn't require an insane amount of RNG. The RNG part is more just like whether the enemy has that piece on, but once you see that they've got that piece, then you can easily grab the blueprints for it and then build it yourself. So I don't mind that mechanism. There is incentive to aim just for the unarmored parts because that's the squishy part, and that part is much easier to hit, wail on, and defeat your enemy quicker. But you're not going to get the armor pieces or other materials for using that to like upgrade and stuff like that. For the most part, you're going for the armored part, which means the enemies can take a little bit more and can wail on you just as equally. I don't mind the risk and reward system that's in place. I think it's a good mix. Like if you just want to get to the boss really quickly or just get to a certain enemy, then go for the squishy stuff. Otherwise, aim for the armor stuff because that'll get you the stuff that you need in order to improve your character. This one's also, just like the Surge, you can essentially accumulate essentially what these are, like it's tech points to level up your character and get some stat boosts and stuff like that, but you can bank them, so there's less risk in terms of like losing all your stuff, which is kind of makes it a little bit easier, as in like more of an introduction to games that are Souls-like, so not a bad starting point. That along with Code Vein, those are two I'd say that are decent ones to start with if you're wary on Dark Souls in general. They're a bit more forgiving. I think I played about a third of the game so far, so I've only come across a few bosses, but the ones that I've fought are interesting and at least a bit more they're mechanically a little bit tougher to fight, because most of the enemies that I've had to fight are just humanoid enemies. But the part that I'm currently stuck on is I got into what is, I think, a zoo park or something like that, and there are robots, and the robots just do not give a shit about you fighting them, so they don't get staggered nearly as easily and stuff like that, so I'm having a real difficult time learning how to defeat them. But so far I'm enjoying The Surge 2. I think it's definitely a lot better than the first one. It's kept my attention a bit more, and it's got a good loop. Story-wise, it's it's meh, but gameplay-wise, it's a lot better.
That's what matters.
I know that was kind of a short one, but I'm trying to remember what I played weeks ago.
That's fine. I think we're at like a good time for the podcast anyway.
So outro time. Thank you all for joining us this episode of the Frosty Canucks podcast. You can follow this podcast on Twitter at the Frosty Canucks. You can also listen to this podcast on Anchor, Stitcher, Apple, YouTube, and
Spoofy.
Thank you. And you can follow myself at Javim Animation. That's JAVM Animation. Sometimes I post some stuff that I'm playing. Sometimes I post the art that I'm working on. I think I'm getting a little bit better post by post on that front. So anyway, your shit.
You can follow me at FrostyLate on Twitter. That's where everything that's going on gets posted. Occasionally some shit posts. Read my shit on frostylate.ca. That's where the bulk of the things that I care about go, written-wise. I actually had the entire week off, and I spent some time writing, but I didn't actually put anything out this week. There'll probably be some stuff out next week. I didn't want to deal with the stress of actually having to finish a piece of content. Writing is fine. Editing and putting together the post is a much larger beast.
Then it's Thanksgiving week.
Yeah.
In Canada.
I guess the other thing is occasionally art goes up on Instagram. That's also at FrostyLight. Nothing really new has gone up there. I think mostly because Facebook shit its pants, which means that Instagram was down. It's probably back up again by now, but I haven't uploaded like at least one of the drawings I've done recently there.
Your Twitter profile?
Yeah, the spoopy foofo. If you want art, Instagram. If you want everything, Twitter, go read my blog, frostylite.ca.
All right. Thank you all for joining us this episode, and stay frosty.